record button. We like to record this because of two reasons. One, so that we can get better at presenting and getting some feedback and learning and improving. And secondly, it gives the opportunity of others who haven't been able to make this session to see the recording at their own leisure. As I said, we really appreciate you taking out an hour and a plus from your calendars and your schedules to join us for this presentation today. And I just wanted to give you some context and background to this webinar. Myself, Nicola, and Simon had a catch up about 2 or 3 weeks ago where we sat together, well, virtually, I should say, and had a quick discussion around the impact of COVID on business and the challenges that we'd seen. And we started brainstorming and coming up with some ideas and thoughts around how things have transpired, how businesses have changed, how they've pivoted, and how technology and digital change is now kind of being accelerated. And what we decided to do was, rather than continue the discussion there, we said, let's do a webinar and share our collective thoughts. And what I do want to make stress is these are our thoughts. This is not a prescribed model or theory. This is we're sharing some of our experiences over the last sort of 8 to 9 months, and some of the things that we hope will be taken forward in terms of best practice and normality in the future. I'm just also letting a few more people who are joining come in. So just to kind of frame the session, we'll introduce ourselves. I'll do a bit intro myself, then Simon, and then Nicola. Then we're going to run through 3 types of organizations that we see emerging as part of this pandemic, and we're going to be running a poll to get your feedback. Simon will then talk a little bit about some of the change aspects and some of the traits that he's seeing, and be again reaching out to you to get your inputs. And in addition, I will then kind of follow through with what does it mean to be a digital first technology organization, and also we'll be getting your feedback and input via those polls. Just bear with me as I'm omitting others as well as they come in. And then I'm going to do a little bit of a wrap up around change management, or what I'd say is what the change mentality should be, and a little bit of a blueprint as a takeaway, and then hand over to Nicola, who will be closing off around organizational change and a blueprint that we've kind of constructed for this session. We'd like you to actively encourage you to share questions and thoughts and ideas as we go through the presentation, and post them up in the chat function. Either myself, Nicola, or Simon will pick them up, and we will try to either answer them during the presentation, or pick up and try collectively answer them towards the end of the webinar session. Just a little bit about us. So me, I'm a digital and IT transformation specialist. I've been around in business and IT for 25 years plus. As you can see, there's a number of organizations and roles I've played in many sectors. I've worked in public and private sector, and not only in the sectors, but I've also worked in management consultancy, and I've worked in industry. So I have a real practitioner hat about me. It's not just academical theory. This is real practical experience of leading transformational change using technology as a driver. And a few years ago, I set up my own business. It's called Innovative Quality Solutions, or IQS. And we sit at that sweet spot between business and IT, trying to get the IT function department aligned to the business agenda. And as you can see, there's a whole bunch of logos of clients and organizations I've worked through. Enough about me, and I'm going to now ask Simon to introduce himself.
Yeah, so my background is I'm a data-led brand marketeer. I've worked extensively over more than 25 years in retail, financial services, and online, so catalog marketing. I've also been involved in an agency, so I ran a direct marketing agency. So again, a lot of practical and pragmatic experience working on the client side of the fence before forming Custarian with Nicola Collister who's going to come on to talk about herself in a few minutes, about 7 years ago now, I think. So that's me in a nutshell. On to Nicola.
Thank you, Simon. Over to Nicola. Can you hear me? Or are you? Hope you're not on mute.
No. Can you hear me? Can you drop the slide down, Kuldip?
Yeah, sure. Here you go.
So Nicola Collister, as Simon said, co-founder of Custerian. We set Custerian up in terms of we develop solutions, we deliver or manage change on behalf of organisations, and as Simon said, practical and pragmatic advice because we've come out of business. So my background, slightly different to Simon, mine is more operations, commercial, transformation, and also divisional MD for organisations. So across a spectrum of multi-sector from services organisations such as previously RAC, that logo's not on here, through to being on the operating board at Shop Direct Group, who went through a huge retail transformation. And then we've worked with clients across multiple sectors from gyms such as Pure Gym through to utilities, pharmaceutical, obviously one on there that's in the press for good reasons at the moment. So a lot of operational transformations, but equally also delivering innovation. So innovation has been at the heart of what I've done. I'm definitely a change agent and looking for much better ways of doing things, across operating models.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nicola. And I think we're going to lead with you around emerging business organisations.
Absolutely. And also just to mention, I've dropped it out on the chat function. If anybody, we do want to keep this as interactive as possible. So we won't wait till the end, by the way. If anyone has got any questions, please just drop it on the chat and we will sort of interject with those questions as we go throughout. So because we want you all to get as much out of this as possible. So as Kuldip said, if we think about what's happened over the last, gosh, it feels like years, but, the last few months as we've gone through 2020, that has catapulted us forward in terms of driving change, driving the digital agenda, which Kuldip's going to come on to. But what it has done is actually fragmented businesses and into three, we've called it sort of three almost architectural types of businesses. You've got the first type of business that in effect, we've called them the protector. So they're the ones that are focused on trying to protect the old operating models. They've reacted to the crisis by, in some cases, almost being in denial and in some cases still being in denial, hoping things that as we enter 2021, things will just snap back to how they used to be. These are the types of businesses that you'll hear them talking about, as soon as we can, we'll be bringing colleagues back into the office so they don't see, remote working as part of their operating model going forwards. They're hoping in some cases if they're providing services to customers or selling things to customers that customers will stop phoning them as much or contacting them as much. A lot of their effort is really internally focused. So it's about cost cutting, it's about putting things on hold. In some cases, these organisations have actually stopped a lot of the investment in transformational things because they're in this protection mode and ultimately just trying to protect revenues. How can we, get the next book? And in some cases are accepting suboptimal services. So, we can probably all think about those types of organisations. It might be organisations that we work within, it might be organisations we're working with, or it might be organisations as a consumer that we're interacting with. So, we heard recently one CEO of a very large utilities company, and we won't be naming names, but that CEO said, as soon as we can, we'll be bringing everybody back to the office. And there was probably an element of control in that loss of control with remote working. And likewise, how many IVRs are you, hitting still when you're contacting an organisation and the IVR is still saying, due to COVID, our lines are busy and we have less staff. Well, 9 months on, if you've still not sorted that out, then you're going to have an issue as you go into 2021. So that's the first type of business. I'm going to move over to C, the galvanized business. And this business is, it's the type of business that has really focused now on competing in a new world. 69% of leaders have actually said that they've seen a significant change now in customers' expectations throughout COVID and since COVID. Maybe at the start of COVID, we saw customers were actually probably a little bit less demanding and almost a little bit more accepting of poor service and poor experiences. But, you know, to a degree now, customers are fed up of that. And they've actually seen those businesses that have changed, that have transformed, that have really focused the lens on what's the experience like for the user, for the customer. So, you know, the galvanized businesses are the ones that have reacted positively. They've reacted quickly, you know, reacted with agility, and also reacted by saying, how can we make it better for the customer? What do we do differently? How can we change what we're doing? What they've also done, though, is not just focused on the customer, they've actually focused on the colleague. So they've looked at how people are behaving inside the organisation. They've looked at how their partners are behaving, their suppliers are behaving, and they've rapidly changed and built solutions. And those solutions are not just technology solutions, it could be ways of working, it could be communication solutions. So they're the ones that have reacted, you know, very quickly to the needs of the business and to those that are interacting with that business. Just a couple of examples. So Marks and Spencer's, in a press release actually back in May 20, actually said they were launching their Never the Same Again transformation program. I think it will be interesting because, you know, clearly Marks and Spencer's, as you know, one of the great British retailers, has suffered in the last 10 years of being able to react quickly to customer demands, not just their, you know, product and proposition. So I think it'd be really interesting to see what happens as a result of the Never the Same Again transformation program. And then the second example is the Co-op. I think a fantastic example, actually, of they actually built and launched, again, within a matter of months, a new platform called Cooperate. And this was actually designed to help connect community groups and local charities with people in the community that would want to give back and to give and to create value in the community. So that wasn't about, you know, generating revenues. It wasn't about, you know, trying to improve profitability. It was about how could they, as a community retailer, actually you know, connect partners, charities, groups with, you know, consumers in those communities to give back. So there's a couple of great examples of businesses that have reacted. And again, I'm sure we can think of those that have responded well throughout the last few months. And then in the middle, there's the frozen business. So we've called that, you know, business type B. And they are simply the ones that are not really doing type A, but they're not really doing type B. They might be, in some cases, being a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde. They're doing some elements of type A and some elements of type C. But ultimately what they're doing, again, is just standing still and really not making a difference in terms of moving forward. So those are the sort of three types of businesses that we've drawn, certainly from our discussions, from our conclusions over the last few months. So I think it'd be interesting to get your views now in terms of organisations that you're either working in. It could be organisations that you've worked with. So if you're a consultant or a change specialist, you know, an organisation you've worked with, or, you know, equally any business that springs to mind. So I think it'd be good to Kuldip, if we could move.
Yeah, absolutely.
Slide. Yeah, so it's just a quick poll now, just to say which of these types of organisations do you think you're in, or as I say, do you think you're working with the Protector organisation, type B, the frozen, type C, those that are galvanised. Is it a combination of some of the above, or none of the above? And if you want to, if you just hold your phone up, actually, if you put it onto camera, hold your phone up on the scan code, and it will literally take you through to the poll. And it's an interactive poll, and we'll be able to show it on screen.
Yeah, as long as you've got internet access, and you can either on your laptop or your desktop or your mobile phone, you can take the barcode and it will take you straight to the site. You can put the code in, which is #W506, and you can vote. And I can see people are voting already.
I really like this poll, actually. It's great to see it on screen live.
I shall just give it a little bit more time. I think it's worth, Nicola, you trying to summarize what you think you see here.
Yeah, I think it's actually really interesting to see that. Yeah, I mean, great news is actually, so those that you're working with are galvanized by, you know, what the last few months has driven and has caused businesses to do. I think, Philip, thank you for the comment. Yeah, many of us are consultants. So yeah, for those that are working with businesses, as you say, you're actually probably, there's a reason why. It's because those businesses are galvanized, and actually, you know, they could be, you know, using your services to help them. So, but interestingly, as you say, a combination of the above. So 40% saying a combination of the above in terms of, yeah, you know, there may be in some cases, and it might be certain parts of the organisation are frozen. You know, we've certainly seen that with some organisations where you've probably got the more customer facing side of the business are galvanised, and they're galvanised for a couple of reasons. One, because on average, I was actually on a UK industry forum this morning to do with customer service and customer experience and customer contact. And over 20% of businesses in the UK that have got, you know, large volume contact centres are seeing, of the businesses in the UK, 20%, they're seeing 20% on average more volume coming in. So you could see as a result, you know, the customer service functions certainly being galvanised because they're having to significantly change with 20% more volume and in some cases less staff. So yeah, I think that's a good poll. So thanks for that, Kuldip. So I'm going to come on to now just talking about, I'm going to cover off the managing change and just the considerations around, you know, when managing change, what are some of the things to call out in terms of, you know, the things that can cause pitfalls. Equally though, the things that are helping organisations now react quickly and react correctly in the right way to the way in which they are managing change within the whole organisation. And again, this is not just a, you know, driving digital or from a technology point of view. That has a really important role. But again, what certainly COVID has done in the last 9 months, it's challenged the whole business, it's challenged the whole operating model, it's challenged the way that people work, the way that people think about work. You know, even down to times of day, you know, the way in which we now, you know, consume information and, you know, manage our day has changed. So this is all around, you know, some of the components of managing change are around thinking almost less about change management, so less about, you know, the central function that might be managing change or your change governance or your change approach. Even your change methodology. Is it waterfall? Is it agile? You know, is it Kaizen? Is it, you know, a whole host of different ways of managing change? It's more about now organizations really having to think about the change mentality and the change culture, because as businesses have moved to much more distributed models, it's really important now that continuous improvement and change management and that change mentality is in the DNA of the organisation. So it's good if you're within an organisation or working within an organisation to actually think beyond change management and start to think about the change mentality or the change behaviours right across the organisation. The second point really is around, you know, should the end destination always be a perfect state? And I think, again, you know, with the upheaval that we've seen, actually, you know what, some organisations have changed some things, again, whether it be digital, whether it be moving people to remote working, and it wasn't perfect, but it actually was suitable. It suited the need to get that thing done at that moment in time. Now, it is about assessing the risks and assessing the issues, but it's also about making sure that, in effect, you know, we're never going to be in a perfect state. So what level of perfection are we aiming for? And equally, we'll always be on a constant journey. So I think that pulls in then point 3 around how do we empower and allow colleagues to be on a permanent change journey? One of the things that we've found inside a lot of organisations is that change can be seen as a negative. for a lot of people and a lot of colleagues within the organisation. They actually almost hear the word change, and it sends sort of shudders down the spine, because often they relate it to negative things that's happened in the organisation. So it's important to, that negative thing might have been, I don't know, changes, redundancies, changes in staffing, changes in roles. It's important to actually galvanise and empower colleagues on that change journey to make sure that they can see that they can play a part in, the positive steps forward. So how can they help through their ideas, through their suggestions, equally through helping them to get to design things. So, with flip charts and pieces of paper, or, with technical tools now where you can design things, it's important to empower and to enable and allow colleagues to be on that continuous improvement journey. I won't go through all of these points because you can obviously read them on screen at your own leisure. But what I'll also do is just call out a couple of other important ones, probably the one around purpose. And it's being clear about what role that purpose should play in delivering the business strategy. I did a video, a little video webinar podcast a couple of weeks ago about the purpose of change and purpose, and also change leadership. And it was actually interesting because I did a poll sort of prior to that video, and 25% of people that had posted out on LinkedIn said that 25% said that the purpose and outcomes of a lot of the things that the business was changing weren't clear. So people were setting off on a change journey. They were looking at the what and the why, the what and the how they were going to do things, but they hadn't got a clue really why they were doing something. So being clear about that purpose up front and the outcomes that you're trying to deliver is really crucial and really key. And that will also enable you to get more colleagues as well involved in that when they're clear about why we're doing something. I think the other sort of final point then just to call out is around being able to collaborate around the problems and the outcomes. So, being clear about the purpose and the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. But likewise, often we are changing something because there's potentially some issues, or there's some problems with the way in which it's working. So that could be a process. It could be the way teams are working together. It could be, software. It could be architecture. It could be a whole host of things. So it's important to, look at what we want to collaborate on. And it's important then not to just say, right, well, that's, I don't know, a new system that marketing are going to use. Therefore, let's get the marketing colleagues involved. It's actually where we've seen this work better is about looking at getting people from, different departments, different divisions around the organization, bringing together, cross collaborative teams to actually look at, it might be something to do with marketing, but ultimately, if you think about the chain, further down the chain in the journey, there are people from services, there might be people from supply chain. So actually they, involve people from finance, from HR. So it's really important to get people from across, cross collaborating teams around a problem, around an outcome in terms of managing change going forward. So I think Kuldip, I think I'm going to hand over to Simon now, who's going to talk about.
You've got a poll. You've got a little poll.
Sorry, we've got another poll. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I apologise.
Okay. So here's you want to just talk through that, or shall I do?
Absolutely. No, I can cover it. So it's just, again, to get your input really. Do you recognise any of these traits? Do you recognise some of these traits and none of these things present in your organisation, or do you think they need to be? So keen to get your views on this. And again, away you go. If you just scan, hopefully it's on your phone now. If you scan the scan code, you can select your options.
Thank you, Nicola. We'll give it at least a minute for people to either connect back on. So I think throughout the presentation, you want to be in Slido. So because there's a number of polls coming through.
Yeah, so a lot of people saying, some of the above. So recognizing, some of those things. Oh, many of those things.
Okay, many's starting to increase.
Absolutely. I think just as we're finishing off on that, again, what was interesting a few weeks ago on the poll that I did out on LinkedIn, because I was asking about why change fails in organisations, and whilst 25% said purpose and outcomes weren't clear, and that was, you know, as a result of why change fails, 50% actually said it was down to inadequate change leadership, and that wasn't down to the, you know, the project manager or the program manager. It was actually down to, you know, the senior business leader in the organisation. So somebody in the business, you know, not being accountable or responsible for the change and championing that change in the organisation.
Okay, we have another poll which just follows from this. So that we just, so the first poll, do you want to make a quick comment on that at all,
Yeah,
Nicola?
I think no, I think we've covered it, to be fair. So it's obviously, okay, we say 75% saying some and 25%. Yeah. So I think, do you think they should, you know, they all should be present in your organisation? I think that's interesting, actually, an interesting result to say 50% say yes and 50% say don't know. So I think it would be, yeah, it would be good just to, maybe for those that have said 50% on the don't knows, it would be good to maybe, if you could, if you don't mind, actually just in the chat function, just dropping in, you know, just your thoughts really around why you're not sure about whether those things should be present in the organisation.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. If somebody has a comment around that, that'd be great, and we'll try to pick that up. I think this is a good. I think at this stage it's over to Simon, who's going to be talking about We're moving from change now into agility in the organisation. And Simon, can you hear us?
I can indeed. Can you hear me?
Yeah, definitely. Off you go.
So I will rattle us around these, but I'm going to frame it because we talked about why we should perhaps think about some of these things with regard to what's happened to do with COVID. I was lucky enough to get some access to some benchmark research that was done by a global company, and they're present in China. And one of the big things that they noticed was that digitally enabled companies suffered less going into COVID, spent less time worrying about COVID. I don't mean that in any negative way. I'm talking about this purely within a business context, and devoted a significant amount of the time to thinking about how they would come out of COVID, and came out of COVID better and faster. So again, agile within that sense, we're talking about it from an organizational point of view, and not just the version of it that sort of gained a lot of traction within IT. So this whole thing about digitally driven agility is something that's certainly being picked up and looked at as a consequence of what's happened within COVID. And as we've said, obviously, Kuldip will come on to talk about what a digitally enabled organisation looks and feels like. I'd like to thank Andrew for putting a point in there about metrics, by the way, as well. We're not talking about metrics in most of this, but there is almost something that's given in every engagement we have, which is if you don't measure it, you don't change it. So there is an absolute given that everything revolves around measurement as well. But if you look at the first point around, can you create and maintain clarity? Nicola mentioned about purpose and the role of purpose in organisations. And some of this can be viewed as being brand related and a little bit mugs and t-shirts, as we call it. It's really important that you give people a sense of purpose that they can engage with. An example of that for utility that we work with is to slim down any number of them and just talk about keeping people safe and warm. And these are in an infrastructure type business. So the purpose of this is to say, when you talk about across different stakeholders, what you are talking about doing is whether the shareholders, whether the directors, managers, colleagues, or suppliers, do they understand what it is that you as an organisation are trying to do so that they can feel that they're aligned to it? That provides your first point of entry for being able to work in a more agile way. As a collective and collaborative team sport, I think the most fundamental thing about collaboration is the need to do it and to not respect silos when you are doing it, and to ensure that when you are undertaking a collaborative approach, you include as many of the stakeholders as you possibly can. And I think some people do a silo to customer type approach or do an inside silo type approach. We are talking about silo wide, and we are talking about not respecting hierarchies as well. Top to bottom empowerment. I think most management if you look at some of the companies that struggle with change and to increase pace in change, and what we've seen within COVID is the dramatic need to increase pace, is that what they struggle with doing is moving things quickly. And I think part of that is because what they do is they've got a push down method, and they really what they do is they push tasks down through the organization and try and make them smaller and smaller. So top down empowerment is not about trying to push tasks down. It's about trying to push things in terms of outcomes down and leave people to try and get on with that. And that's the core component of empowerment. Core agile process is agile iteration of ideas and feedback. Again, it's probably worth us saying in here, some people, when they think about agile, think that it's a bit of a free-for-all. Agile still has core components in it. Do you have goals? Do you have clear milestones? Do you have a good governance process in it? But I think the thing that's really important about this is to break things down into smaller steps and to make those steps as iterative possible and to put learning loops into those. So again, a core component of that, and it feeds out of that top one, purpose. Can you therefore establish a real outcome? Can you establish goals? Can you establish metrics for it? And then can you move it in small bite-sized chunks? Again, taking advantage of all the other things in here. In terms of talking about a cultural issue, there are probably three things that are involved in most change that occurs today. Some aspect of technology, some aspect of data information, and then usually some aspect of behaviour, ways of working, or culture. And this is really led by the fact there was loads of work done on this by people like BT many years ago, but it's the shadow of a leader. So if a leader of an organisation doesn't have a purpose that they demonstrably believe in, doesn't empower their colleagues to get on with it, and doesn't obsess about it, then it's unlikely anybody else within the organisation will. So if you are trying to do this where the leadership is not engaged, it will be much more difficult for you to do so. Obviously, trying to convince some leadership teams that they need to adopt this is a difficult thing in itself. And that'll be interesting when we come to the poll at the end of this to see how many people think these types of things are important or are present in some. And there was a point made by Philip, by the way, saying a number of people are consultants on board. If it helps to pick just a key client to think about this, then do. Granting permission. Humans behaviourally tend to be people who are sort of, I don't know, sort of a bit of a, I'll seek permission or I'll seek forgiveness. But there is certainly an element within organisations where you need to let people understand that it's all right to have a go. I'm erring about not saying this the fail fast thing, because I think it's probably more learn fast than it is fail fast. But again, all of these things are part of working in a more collaborative and fast-paced way. Some of this, by the way, is underpinned by the fact that a lot of our structures and processes were designed to be quite risk averse, because the things that we were doing usually involved a lot of investment or took a long time to change. In this day and age, a lot of what we do does not necessarily involve massive investment and does not necessarily need a lot of time to back out for. So you can become more risk orientated in terms of what you're trying to do in business. And the core part of that is go, look, it's all right to have a go, but genuinely have a go. It's very difficult to say to people, look, it's good you've had a go, and then actually demonstrably act as if that was a really bad idea when they got something wrong. We've talked about culture being present in all organisations. This point is, there will be a culture in your organisation that may not be the one that the marketeers have tried to establish, but it may be the culture that's present in the way in which you work. And we've worked with a number of organisations that want to be innovative and want to be risk orientated, but they work in business and markets where that is absolutely an anathema to what they're trying to do. So a real hard look at what is the culture that's present in the business, which is made up by the people in the business, is something that's very much worth doing. For example, if you work in a financial services company, you're probably likely to be quite risk averse. If you work in a Bank in England related business, you're probably likely to be even more risk averse. So do challenge yourselves on some of the goals you set. And I think it's about finding your own way of doing this as well, not sort of assuming that everything needs to be, you know, massively the day after. Your version of iterative and pace might be in a few weeks rather than a few hours. End results, there is a significant body of evidence growing that people are going to be centered around outcomes, and it can take more of a production-led view to this. So they will be focused on trying to create an outcome rather than they will be about performing a role over a task. Again, it's really important if you're going to do that, that people understand who brings what skills to the table, and you create mechanisms for those people to be able to come together and collaborate on that. So hopefully that was clear from what we were talking about. We're going to move into a poll now, Kuldip, as well, just to give people a chance to give us some feedback. Again, it's the one about recognising the traits. It's the same thing when we move on to the next slide, scan the QR code. I know it's always this because people are on mute, but if you're having trouble, do just put something in the message for us and let us know. But it'd be good to get some feedback about, of those traits, what of those do you feel are familiar and present within the organisations that you are dealing with or are in? I realise we might not all be consultants that are on here today.
I think, Simon, just while you're doing that, Andrew's, I know, Kuldip, you're going to pick up one of Andrew's questions. I think that's a good point, Andrew, you just made about an NHS trust, and they want to implement an outreach community initiative, but not sure that they've grasped the idea of service design or management of change. And it's a really important point. We did some work with a very large local authority. And equally, we've done a lot of work with utilities companies where, you know, Ofgem now, you know, it's a regulatory requirement around looking at vulnerable customers and certainly those customers for the distribution networks out in the community. And, you know, service design, you know, understanding those different customer personas, service design, and then how you're going to communicate, engage, you know, involve them and manage the change is really important. So I think it's, yeah, an interesting point you've made, but it's a really important point that, you know, they do need to use, you know, user-centered design tools and frameworks within anything that they're doing within the community.
I've got Andrew's question. I'll add to that as we just move through this. Thank you for being patient with us, Andrew.
Yeah, great. So thank you for that. And again, interesting, some stroke many. I think that prompted a little bit of a comment back from Nicola as well. So one of the things we were talking about is, as people have done quite a dramatic change as a result in reaction to COVID, how many of them have sort of barreled into different ways of working and different managing practices, but are probably trying to retrench. Nicola mentioned senior CEO who wanted to bring all of the team back, and that probably wasn't potentially a great thing to do. But it prompted this thought about unlearning ways of working. And a lot of our management styles are around proximity, being close to people, keeping an eye on people, understanding what they're doing by seeing and talking to them. And there is this whole aspect within it which goes, we need to unlearn what we do, so be conscious about the way we do it before we can move into learning new ways as well. So that was it. I'm really good to see a very high percentage of people think that these things are present outside of IT as well. As I said right at the start, working with agility is a business-wide issue in this day and age. It is not an IT-wide issue, even though some people view that it's their job to come and tell them what to do. It certainly isn't. Over to you, Kuldip.
Yes, thank you, Nicola and Simon. That was really insightful. And thank you for the audience for participating. I'm going to now move on to some considerations about being a digital first organization. And these sound bites that we've got 1 to 8 here are things that I've picked up as I've worked through organizations who are either digital natives or want to become digital natives. So the first thing is making sure that you understand the value that technology can bring as a strategic enabler. A lot of organizations bring in systems and the underlying infrastructure, and they think that's it, we've got technology, but they don't really kind of understand the true value and the benefits and demonstrate that value. So we need to think about technology being not just strategic, but being an enabler for enhancing customer experience and end user experience and the benefits associated with it. I think being a digital organization also needs you to be data driven. Data is viewed as the new oil, if you want to call it, so that it allows you to measure where you are, what you want to change, and so you can provide you with the insight within the context of your organization. So use data, not gut feel and anecdotes. So it's that's a key trait of digital organizations. a lot of digital organizations remove their legacy IT. There's a lot of organizations I've worked in where they've adopted technology over time because technology innovation and adoption has been increasing with time, and they become very complex, and they really need to remove that legacy. It's not easily done, but by removing that legacy, you can remove complexity, and you can get in, build platforms that are very open, that have APIs that allow you to move data quickly across systems. That's no mean feat, but then if you can free the time up in faster processing, you can then bring in the next layer of technology innovation, whatever that might be. I think it's also one that, cloud computing came about 10 years ago. And I would say now a lot of organizations either have moved to the cloud or a multi-tenancy kind of cloud environment with some on-premise, some in the cloud, or are moving. They are very, there's not many organizations haven't done some form of cloud computing, and it can give you business benefits around cost optimization as long as it's well governed, but also you can get agility through that because you can spin up environments and experiment and do proof of concepts if you've got the right technology environments. IT also can give you the agility you want. So things like robotic process automation has emerged over the last couple of years, and that can really enhance the ability to becoming more effective and efficient. And just a couple of points at the bottom. I know Simon mentioned this earlier, having, we talk about capital A as agile in the business, but agile concepts in terms of working and developing products and services in small bite-sized chunks for an agile mindset, and using DevOps as a kind of cultural trait has existed certainly in a number of sectors now, and has really been given the ability to get good customer feedback loops with our clients as we deliver products and services, and actually aided the buy-in and support of systems and technology innovation in a quicker, faster way with our customers. And I think that mindset of agile in the small, but thinking about how agile in the small can fit into agile in the capital A in the business is really important, and bridging that gap. So these are some of the things that we've seen, and I just wanted to ask again a number of questions to run another survey based on these traits. So I'm going to again ask everybody to pick up their phones or log into Slido. The questions I'd really like to unearth is: have you embraced in your organization or the organizations that you've worked in, are you using technology as an enabler for digital transformation? That's a simple yes or no. And then secondly, how successful have you been? And do you have a digital strategy that underpin that kind of overarching corporate digital strategy that underpins the transformation? And how long have you been on that journey? Is it 6 months, under 2 years, or over 2 years? So let's move into those questions. Hopefully you can let me know if your organization is embracing digital transformation using technology. Wow. That's the answer I was hoping for.
Yeah. Might have been slightly worried if it had been 100% no.
Yeah. I like thank you, Andrew, for your comment. Wagile. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give it another 5 seconds. I would be surprised if, because of the prevalence of technology in everything we do and the experience it can bring, technology is now driving change, and the CIO or the CDO is now sitting at the top seat, enabling digital transformation with the support of the CEO. So, second question was around how successful have you been? Somewhat. Oh, very. That's interesting. But still, the majority there are saying somewhat successful, which then does tell me what I tend to see is that transformation is not easy, because there are certain impediments. Either the IT function is not aligned, we haven't got the skills or capability, or the biggest impediment is usually change. How do we change our working ways, our methods, our processes, and how do we ensure people come along with the change, they're bought into it? That tends to be a big impediment, and maybe that's wrapped up in so what, potentially. And the final question was, do you have a digital strategy? Oh, that's really positive. But still, there's a number who have said no. So I'd love to hear some comments around why people haven't been successful, and also why you haven't got a digital strategy. And maybe those are organizations that are struggling with customer experience, engagement with communities, engagement with their users, and maybe they're automating and digitizing, not actually transforming. And finally, how long have they been transforming? Under 2 years, over 2 years, under 6 months, nobody. So this has been going on. Some of this stuff goes on for quite a while. Absolutely. The challenge that I face is if you go above 2 years and you haven't really shown many results, tangible business benefits, what you end up is with disillusionment and a change in leadership, and then we start again. The old transformational fatigue transpires if you haven't really got the sponsorship and the buy-in and people going with you, and you can't demonstrate value. Again, it'd be great if anybody would like to expand on that with some comments. I'm going to just firstly thank you everybody for that, and then move into my final section, which is about bringing some of this together. And I'm going to try to hopefully answer Andrew's question around change in a public sector environment as well. In part of the framework I'm going to show everybody. So one of the things that we did as planning for this webinar, we said, well, what can we leave the audience with? And we've kind of come up with a couple of kind of blueprints, and one of them is a blueprint for change. It's not, and actually change management maybe is the wrong title. This is about change forever. I think we live in a world where everything is change is constant. If one lesson I've learned from the impact of COVID-19 is we were in an environment where it was not about this is what we've got to do. This is we have to do this. For example, moving to remote working for many organizations just had to happen. I've worked some of my interactions with some local councils recently in higher education institutions. They moved to thousands of people to using Microsoft Teams in 10 weeks, some 5 weeks. I have had another vice chancellor said that we've implemented our 5-year digital strategy in 6 months. That's absolutely extraordinary. And the underpinning concept there is that they had to do it. And what happened there, and some of the insights that I've got from senior leaders, is that actually people coalesced on a business problem. There was a need, it had to happen. People formed groups, people with skills in technology or from a business acumen or a supply chain or from finance or from procurement, all got together, said we need extra licenses, or we need extra hardware, we need laptops, we need routers, we need to get extra staff on the help desk. They all coalesced and they solved a problem, and they got the job done. And for me, that really, what that's telling me is we need to kind of continue to empower people to solve problems. If you think of the things Nicola was talking about in terms of empowering our staff, give them the options to give them the resources, give them the freedom, give them the permission to go and make the change happen. And in this case, we had to, and people coalesced around that business problem with an outcome and got stuff done. It wasn't perfect, but that adaptive way of working is what I think a lot of organizations need to continue to embrace for the new norm. They've what I think organizations who have galvanized the type C kind of organization that we talked about, they're the ones that have taken that learning, they're capturing that learning, they're providing strong leadership commitment. And as you can see, there's two verticals here. There's the change is normal piece, there's the employees driving change. Once you've got that commitment and leadership, you can develop the informal and informal networks, empower the staff with the decision making, let them focus on the business problem and let them solve it in a constant adaptive way. And I think to Andrew's question, in some of our public sector organizations, we've put in big governance structures. Things have to go from the top to the bottom and down. We need to be thinking about bringing in agile decision-making mechanisms, much more looser with the empowerment with people. And that's why we just kind of framed, I'm not going to go round each of the words here, but these are the kind of high-level sound bites that bring together change as being normal, it's rational, it needs to be understood, it's a mentality, it's a constant thing, it's going to evolve, and we need to empower our staff in solving those challenges with constant communication. I hope that's gone some way to answer some of your question, Andrew, around how you can bring change into the public sector with some of these kind of traits. It's not, there's a lot of level of detail underneath this, but I hope it just gives you a little a view of what our experiences over the last few months have been in some of the organizations that are now galvanizing and moving forward with change. I'm going to hand over to Nicola to kind of embrace the organizational change framework we've also developed as part of this webinar.
Thanks, Kuldip. No, it was great, as you say, to talk about almost the change management practices and the things that will help change be delivered successfully in organisations. And I think as part of that, one of the things, again, we wanted to just leave you with a framework that it's fantastic to see, as you say now, that lots of digital strategies, digital transformations, are prevalent and relevant for organisations, because as a consumer in our day-to-day lives, technology plays a huge part in that. However, technology doesn't play the only part of it. And, again, we will have experienced this. I've certainly experienced this in some of my exec roles in organisations, particularly large volume organisations, where in effect, technology has been designed and delivered, procured and then given to people. And it's almost felt like it's been done to them rather than involving them in the solution. So involving them in the process and the solution that's required. So we talk about 5 levers, and technology is an important part of that now. I don't think there's any business, any charity, any organisation in the world that hasn't got, technology to some degree in its operating model. And technology is about clearly looking at the infrastructure, the security and the applications. So, what role do you need technology to fulfill as part of your change management and as part of your operating model? But just as important is from a people point of view. So not only from a change management about involving people, collaborating people, testing things out with people, and those people, are your colleagues, it could be your customers, it could be clients if you're in B2B. In the NHS, it could be commissioning groups, pharmaceutical, it could be the end patient, and that's why we call it people and not just customer, because it's people inside the organisation, but it's also the people that you're interacting with outside the organisation. So it's important to understand how are you going to involve them, but it's also important as part of the change management and operating model to understand the skills, the capabilities, the way in which people are going to communicate with one another, and, you know, all the different aspects to people. And again, with the shift to technology, it's causing organizations now to look at the people skills and capabilities, both from a technology point of view, but also from a data and from an analytics perspective. So people plays, you know, that's the second lever within the 5 lever model. Around your processes, and this is where, again, you know, we should be designing things for our people, for customers, for clients, for users. We should be looking at how do we design that? How does the process perform across, you know, the end-to-end journey? We should also, this is where we bring in looking at it from a client or from a customer's perspective. So how do you, you know, how do you look at this and map out your end-to-end customer or client journey? It could be a colleague journey if it's an internal change that you're making. And then your processes and operating procedures and knowledge content, all of the things then that support that in terms of describing from A to Z what that needs to look like. In terms of ways of working, this is where starting to think about, again, the, you know, almost the seismic change that COVID has caused. I've always been a great believer, and actually have designed operating models that has enabled home working. So from 20 years ago at the RAC, you know, through to 10 years ago for a very large retailer where we set up 1,200 self-employed home workers all across the UK. So ways of working now, you know, it could be including remote working, it could be including how do we innovate together. Some businesses have gone down the route of having innovation hubs. It's about how we communicate, how we collaborate, you know, all of those things that help break down the functions and the silos that were referred to earlier on. Kuldip referred to it, and obviously Simon referred to it. So that's about, again, you know, describing and then designing how you are going to work going forwards. And then finally, the 5th lever is around insight and analytics. And this links back to not only how are we going to measure and analyze and gain the insights into the outcomes that we need to deliver. So it's about looking at, you know, in terms of change, what outcomes were we looking to deliver? But it's also about, again, linked to the process and linked to technology. If you look at all the various different touch points across that process, across that journey, how do we know where things are going? And equally, how can we start to get predictive insights into what could be happening next? And with the beauty now of AI, of data sciences, of algorithms, getting all of the information into one place can help design, much better insights and analytics into how things are performing. So we just wanted to share that with you, to say, as you say, we've talked a lot about digital and technology, but that's just one core part of how to bring and to design change well in your organizations or organizations that you're working with. And it's certainly our practice and best practice to look at the different levers in any change management within organizations.
Thank you, Nicola. I'm going to ask Simon, Nicola, and I will, of their final thoughts before we open it up to Q&A, and I will unmute everybody so people can ask questions. Simon, first, is there a final thought in terms of a quick wrap up for you that you want to share with everybody?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple of comments there about a number as being from a consultancy background. I think from my point of view, we understand that a lot of people talk about change and talk about agility. What we try and reflect is some of the real world that we meet in there. And I think from a lot of organizations that we come across is they still believe that change is something they have to initiate and that they can control. Where actually the reality is change is absolutely constant and going on around them. And unless they've got a change mentality, then they're probably not going to react to it. So it's much more like being carried along a river and having some chance of whether you swim towards the banking than to be able to stand in the tide of it. And that's framed a lot of, I think, our conversations and comments about this as well. People talk about being much more change orientated than certainly we find they are when we get in there, which is why we wanted to share this information. So thank you, Kuldip.
Thank you, Simon. My final thought, I'll give you a little bit of a respite, Nicola, before you come back on. My final thought is that digital transformation is not just about technology. It is about a mindset shift. And you know, a number of times in this presentation we've talked about constant change. I think we need to really think about, in our leadership and managerial roles, to empower people with the ability to adopt a change approach, rather than shoehorning them into particular roles. We need to be making them think out the box, solving business problems, and to achieve outcomes, giving them the freedom to be able to experiment within certain boundaries, and things need to be governed. I understand that. You need to ensure there's still governance and purpose in the organization. But I think so many times I've worked with organizations where there's such an untapped knowledge and experience across the organization that just isn't harnessed. And once you harness that experience, you can make that change really happen, as long as it's tied to a strong purpose and outcomes that you're trying to achieve. So digital, for me, whilst technology is absolutely a fundamental enabler, it's digital transformation to me is about getting people bought into that journey, and making sure that that you untap that knowledge and experience to make change happen. That's my final thought. Nicola, do you want to do that before we open up for Q&A?
Yeah, probably just to build actually on what you were just saying, Kuldip. I think, as you say, it's really important. It's all about enablement as well in terms of digital. I think it's been fascinating. I was on a panel listening to what some of the local housing authorities have done over the last, again, since COVID. And it's staggering actually, and incredible to see that some of them have gone from less than 20% digital adoption, and this is with local people that are living in housing association houses or flats, and they've gone from less than 20% to some of them are talking about staggering figures of 76-78% in terms of digital adoption. And it isn't just about changing interfaces so that now as a citizen, I don't just phone a housing association, I now do things for myself. It's not just about the technology itself, it's about the other things that they've done. So the work that they've done out in the communities, the digital champions, those that are in financial distress, how can they get access to services again through the mobile phone? So it's really getting organizations to think about, as you say, not just the culture and the enablement inside the organization, but again back to your clients, your customers, your partners, your suppliers, involving them in terms of the design of it, but equally how are you going to support enabling them in order to adopt that digital technology.
Yeah, thank you. And that's where technology is reaching out to communities, giving with their connectivity, they can engage with, say, a council service or a housing service. Yeah, absolutely. I've just turned the Zoom function so that anybody can unmute themselves. So if there's a burning question, they can unmute themselves and ask either Nicola, Simon, or me, or a question. And I did pick up Andrew's question. If there's anything else, Andrew, you want us to expand on, we can. But the opportunity is there to ask questions.
Kuldip, I've got one, if I may.
Yep.
It's Bernard, by the way, not Joe. Sorry about that.
Hello, Bernard.
Hi. This is fascinating. Well done to everybody, by the way. It's really good to share this stuff. But just sort of one thing, humans, we're emotional creatures and boundedly rational at best. And often with change, people can see that as losing something, either status, power, whatever. And it was interesting to see that actually when change happens is when people just need to do it. There's a burning need. How do you get people into that space of actually leaning forward into change rather than resisting it? Because there's a view, either real or not, that they're going to lose something. I'd be interested to hear what you guys think of that.
So let me come in on that, Bernard, and then I think you've got some views.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Bernard, for asking a question to do with the sort of human aspect of this, because of course everything rests on whether, and there was a question from Andrew posted in the chat, which is around trying to get GPs to pick up on using Fitbit type information. I think for me that what you're talking about is the use of a burning platform, and COVID, which is why it framed this conversation, was sort of the ultimate burning platform. Humans are very good at pushing everything out of the way when something really important happens. I think for us, that's why, and we didn't want to labour it on this one too much. Purpose and the use of purpose is fundamentally important. And what you're trying to do is get purpose to a level that people can understand it and feel they can contribute to it. And that to understand, to deliver that purpose better, then actually they're going to have to change some of the ways in which they work and they do. And I think it's creating that rational reason for change that makes sense and seems touchable and reachable, and then bringing them into that collaboration process. One of the things we say to people quite a lot of the time is you do need to bring people into any change process. And I think the interpret it, that will make it easy and everybody will be happy. What it does is it flushes out all these concerns early doors. And it gets, because in any group, you'll have people who are change orientated and people who are not change orientated. It enables the discussion and identification and get to some resolution as to what it is you can do to help those people feel more comfortable with it. And even the use of things like, and we do it at some of our workshops, and we did it yesterday, you know, we'd like to engage in a digital transformation journey, but we don't know what one is. We said, well, if you had a mobile phone 5 years ago and you've now got a smartphone, you've just been through a digital transformation. So to bring that outside in thinking to it as well. It's not a simple thing to do, Bernard, that's absolutely true, but it's about breaking it down to a level that people can understand it, feel they can contribute to it, then understand there is going to be resistance as well as there is going to be acceptance and contribution to it. I don't know if either Nicola or Kuldip anything else.
I was going to jump. Do you want to? I'll just quickly jump in there, Bernard. Thank you for the question. I think the biggest challenge I found, or I have seen, when trying to implement change, is that things are either driven too fast, and what happens is the new leader comes in, he's driving change, and he is burning the tires, and what that stops people to do, because we are emotional beings, is unlearn. They need to learn new ways of working, and they need to unlearn what the old ways were. And back to what Simon said, the way to do that, I've seen success in change, is that you need to co-create and get the troops, the people, the staff, the employees involved in co-creating the change. You've got to get them to be part of the change and them owning the change. And that change will only happen, that co-creation and that enablement and change will only happen if they're bought into the overall purpose and vision of where the enterprise and the organization is going. And that is the onus on leadership to create that compelling, visionary statement or strategy, if you want to, a vision, so that they're bought into it. And on top of that, yes, they need to be incentivized to be part of that change. So there's a whole mix of co-creation, incentives, purpose, engagement, collaboration. There's a whole bunch of things that can make that happen, in my experience. Sorry, Nicola, over to you.
Yeah, it's just actually, there's probably another point I just want to add. So I think absolutely, Kuldip, that was great. I think there's just also, we've talked about unlearning. I think, Bernard, to answer your question as well, it's important to let people unload as well. So quite often, as you say, those that are galvanized by change, actually they just want to get on and change things and design new things, and often, you know, some people are frightened by that because it's had a negative impact, or they don't know how to grasp it. So again, it makes me think back to some time ago when we did a session with a lot of engineers. It was a utilities business where we brought engineers who often hadn't come into head office, by the way, but anyway, we brought engineers in the room, and it was really important actually to let them unload first. And actually what was important was for us to listen to, yes, some moans and groans, but equally there was some really valuable insights into some of the unloading of where things had gone wrong before, where people hadn't taken into account that, you know, they're in the dark, the cold, the wet, they're digging holes in the road, you know, they're dealing with water pipes, gas pipes, you name it, and yet they'd had, you know, some technical solutions almost that, as they felt, imposed on them. So it was important for us to get them to unload as well, because there were some really crucial points in some of those stories. So I think, yeah, unlearning's important, but I think unloading's important as well before you move forward.
That's really helpful.
Letting steam off. Sorry, Bernard.
Well, really helpful. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. We do have, I'm just looking at the time, we do have another couple of minutes yet that we had allotted for questions. It's your opportunity to fire those at me, Simon, or Nicola. So please go ahead. If there isn't, I will maybe bring us to a close in a few seconds.
No, we've got no questions. Thank you for a fantastic session and been tweeting away. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah.
And I hope that's how you pronounce it. And thank
Oh,
you,
Lisa,
thank
Lisa
you.
does this in every webinar. She's absolutely amazing.
Brilliant. Thanks to Yara, very insightful, and thanks to Philip as well. So really useful discussion, and thanks to. So yeah, you know, hopefully we really. Thank you, I did pronounce it correctly. We really want, as you say, we enjoy talking about it and actually sharing experiences, because you know you learn from the experiences we've all had, you know, working in organisations or working with organisations. So no, that's been brilliant. And I think, you know, we're always open to, you know, a chat, no obligation chat, ideas, shares. If you think this has been useful, you know, we will certainly do more of them. So it'd be great to get your feedback after this event as well, because I think the more, you know, certainly after the last few months, the more we talk about things now, the more we will learn. So
yeah, and I just wanted to extend that to say that there's a lot of data that we've captured here. We are thinking about how we can wrap that up maybe in some blog or paper, but we also have been talking about coming back with that data and then presenting that information and then adding to it and continuing evolving. Let's make this into a continuous change thing, because practices in change evolve and our lessons learned change. So I absolutely agree with that, Nicola. I'd love to maybe in the new year think about a second run of this in a different format, maybe a different way.
yeah, brilliant.
Simon, anything from you?
No, I think again, just thank you for the contribution, the offer to share, and just to re-emphasise that again, which we said right at the start, COVID has proved people are perhaps more change orientated than they ever thought they were. Really important now, not just to run from one side of the boat back to the other side of the boat. There are some positives that have come out of this from a ways of working and business point of view. And the more we get the opportunity to share and in doing so learn, the better from my point of view. So thank you for the questions, and thank you for sharing with us all.
Yep. And our contact details are there on the slide. Please reach out to us if you've any follow-on questions. Oh, and thank you for all the lovely comments, Lisa, Andrew, Antonia. Thank you, Bernard. It's been lovely. And thank you for taking the time to spend an hour 15 with us. And with that said, I'm going to close the session.
Antonia was asked for a copy of the slides, by the way.
Oh, has she? Okay. Yes, Antonia, I will. My Shawbrook friend, absolutely.
Brilliant. And we'll be sharing, Kuldip, I think we said we're going to share a copy of the video out as well, aren't we, once we get that downloaded?
Yeah, we will. We'll put it up on YouTube. We'll communicate it within the LinkedIn invite where you registered, so you see the videos and anything follow-ups as well. But yeah, absolutely, we'll do that. Thank you.
Right. So share out with any of your colleagues or your friends or anybody that you think that might find it useful. But no, thanks to everyone, and stay safe, everybody.
Take care. Thank you.